Stop chasing people. Stop believing that constant connection makes you stronger. Society tells you to stay visible, stay social, stay surrounded. It tells you that being alone is dangerous, that silence means failure, that isolation means you are falling behind. But what if that belief is exactly what is keeping you weak? What if the noise is the cage? What if the crowd is the distraction? The truth is simple. The strongest minds were never built in crowds. They were forged in silence, in isolation, in moments where no one was watching. This is not about loneliness. This is about power. This is about building a version of yourself that does not need approval, validation, or permission. If you are ready to stop depending on the world and start building within, then listen carefully. Because everything changes when you learn to stand alone. Chapter 1. The Lie of Constant Connection. Noise feels like progress. Movement feels like growth. Constant interaction feels like life is advancing. But most of it is an illusion. The last moment left a clear command. Step back. Turn down the noise. Walk alone. That sounds simple, but resistance appears instantly. The urge to check, to scroll, to respond. The pull is constant. The world trains that response. It rewards attention, not discipline. It rewards presence, not depth. The truth is, constant connection does not build strength. It builds dependence. Every notification pulls focus. Every message demands a reaction. Every moment of noise weakens control. Most people react. You choose. Look around. People are always plugged in. Always talking. Always consuming. Always responding. But very few are actually building anything real. Distraction has been mistaken for progress. Activity has replaced purpose. This is where most people stop. They confuse movement with meaning. Noise creates dependency. Dependency creates weakness. The mind begins to rely on external stimulation just to feel engaged. Silence becomes uncomfortable. Stillness becomes threatening. Without constant input, most people feel empty. That emptiness is not the problem. That emptiness is exposure. The truth is, most people are not addicted to growth. They are addicted to distraction. Growth is slow. Growth is quiet. Growth demands focus. Distraction is fast. Distraction is loud. Distraction demands nothing. So the cycle continues. More scrolling. More checking. More reacting. Less thinking. Less building. Less becoming. Most people react. You choose. The system is designed to keep attention fragmented. Because a fragmented mind is easier to control. A distracted individual never reaches depth. And without depth, there is no real power. Now look deeper. Constant connection does something more dangerous. It rewires the mind. Approval becomes the goal. Validation becomes the reward. Every like, every comment, every response becomes a signal. The brain learns to chase it. Not consciously. Automatically. The truth is, approval is temporary. It fades quickly. It demands more. It never satisfies. But self-control is permanent. It builds over time. It compounds. It strengthens identity. Chasing attention destroys internal focus. It shifts energy outward. Instead of asking what matters, the mind starts asking what will be noticed. Instead of building mastery, the mind starts performing for reaction. This is where most people stop. They trade depth for attention. They trade discipline for visibility. They trade power for approval. And they never realize what they lost. Because it feels good in the moment. Recognition creates a short burst of reward. But that reward is shallow. It does not build anything lasting. It does not strengthen the core. It only feeds the surface. The truth is, Anything built on validation is fragile. The moment validation disappears, motivation disappears. The moment attention fades, effort fades. That is not a strength. That is dependence. Most people react. You choose. Choosing differently requires awareness. It requires stepping back and seeing the pattern clearly. The endless loop of input and output. The constant need to stay connected. The fear of missing out. The fear of being unseen. But being unseen is not a weakness. It is freedom. Now the shift begins. Silence is not emptiness. Silence is space for power. It removes interference. It removes noise. It creates room for thought, for clarity, for control. Disconnection is not loss. It is a strategy. This is where most people stop. They cannot tolerate silence long enough to benefit from it. They return to noise because it feels easier, because it feels familiar, because it demands nothing from them. But nothing grows there. The truth is, silence reveals what noise hides. It exposes habits. It exposes weaknesses. It exposes the parts that need work. That discomfort is necessary. That discomfort is the beginning of strength. Without noise, the mind settles. Focus sharpens. Awareness increases. Decisions become intentional instead of reactive. Most people react. You choose. Choosing silence means choosing responsibility. There is no distraction to hide behind. No constant input to escape into. Only the self remains. And that is where power is built. Solitude is not isolation. It is a construction. It is where identity begins to form without interference. It is where discipline takes shape without external pressure. It is where clarity replaces confusion. Every moment away from noise strengthens control. Every moment disconnected builds independence. Every moment in silence sharpens the mind. The truth is, what feels like loss is actually gain. What feels like emptiness is actually space. What feels uncomfortable is actually necessary. This is not about rejecting the world. It is about refusing to depend on it. Because dependence weakens. Independence strengthens. Most people react. You choose. The choice is simple, but not easy. Continue chasing noise and remain controlled. Or step into silence and begin building something real. This is where the foundation is laid. Not in crowds. Not in constant connection. But in deliberate separation. In intentional quiet. In focused isolation. Because the strongest version of any individual is built away from distraction. You have seen the illusion. You have recognized the trap. Now the real work begins. You have chosen silence over noise. Now it is time to understand what that silence reveals about who you truly are. Chapter 2: Solitude Builds Identity. Clarity only arrives when the noise disappears. The last step demanded separation. Silence over noise. Distance from distraction. That decision creates new pressure. Without constant input, something unfamiliar rises. Thoughts become louder. Patterns become visible. There is no escape from it now. No quick distraction. No external voice to lean on. Just space. Just stillness. Just the truth waiting to surface. The truth is, identity cannot form in the presence of constant influence. When the mind is always absorbing, it never defines. When the environment is always loud, the inner voice is never heard. Most people never realize this. They spend their lives surrounded, influenced, guided, and shaped by everything except themselves. This is where most people stop. They stay in the noise because it gives them a ready-made identity. Trends decide their taste. Opinions decide their beliefs. The crowd decides its direction. It feels easier. It feels safe. But it is not real. Who you are becomes clear only when the noise disappears. Without influence, there is no script to follow, no expectation to meet, no performance to maintain. What remains is raw, unfiltered, often uncomfortable, but real. Most people react. You choose. Choosing solitude means choosing to discover rather than copy. It means allowing the mind to think without interference. It means facing the silence long enough for something honest to emerge. The truth is, solitude reveals truth. Not the polished version. Not the version shaped for approval. The real version. The one that has been buried under years of noise. And that truth can be difficult to face. Because external voices have long shaped identity. Family, friends, society, media. Every voice leaves an imprint. Every opinion adds weight. Over time, the original self becomes harder to recognize. Borrowed opinions create fragile minds. A mind built on borrowed ideas cannot stand alone. It depends on agreement. It fears opposition. It avoids conflict. Because deep down, it knows it has no foundation. This is where most people stop. They never question what they believe. They never examine where their thoughts come from. They simply repeat what they have heard. The truth is, strength comes from internal clarity, not external agreement. Clarity is built in silence. It is built by thinking deeply, by questioning everything, by removing what does not belong, by refining what remains. Most people react. You choose. Choosing clarity means rejecting the comfort of borrowed identity. It means building something that can stand without support. Something that does not change based on who is watching. That process requires solitude. Because only in solitude can the mind separate what is real from what is adopted. Without solitude, identity is imitation. With solitude, identity becomes creation. The truth is, this process is not comfortable. It is not smooth. It forces confrontation. It brings forward thoughts that have been ignored, emotions that have been avoided, patterns that have been hidden. There is no distraction to escape into now. This is where most people stop. They feel the discomfort and turn back. They return to noise. They return to distraction. They return to the familiar illusion of identity shaped by others. But discomfort is the gateway to identity. That tension, that unease, that internal resistance. It is not a signal to stop. It is a signal that something real is being uncovered. Growth begins when distraction ends. Without distraction, the mind is forced to engage, to reflect, to analyze, to understand. It begins to see clearly. It begins to separate truth from influence. Most people react. You choose. Choosing to stay in that discomfort is what builds strength. It is what sharpens awareness. It is what creates a stable identity that does not shift with every external change. Because once identity is built internally, it becomes unshakable. The truth is, a strong identity does not need validation. It does not need approval. It does not need constant reinforcement. It stands on its own. And that kind of identity can only be built alone. Every moment in solitude is an opportunity to refine it, to remove what is false, to strengthen what is real, to align actions with truth instead of expectation. This is not isolation. This is construction. Piece by piece, the real self begins to take shape, not based on trends, not based on approval, not based on fear, but based on clarity. And clarity creates power. Because when identity is clear, decisions become simple. Direction becomes obvious. Discipline becomes natural. There is no confusion, no hesitation, no need for external confirmation. Most people react. You choose. They wait for guidance. You act with certainty. They follow trends. You follow the truth. They depend on approval. You depend on clarity. That difference changes everything. The truth is, the person built in solitude moves differently, thinks differently, acts differently. There is no need to prove anything. No need to seek recognition. The identity itself is enough. But it all begins with facing the silence, staying in the discomfort, allowing the truth to surface. This is where most people stop. But not here. Because once identity is built, the next challenge appears. Standing on that identity without support. Acting without relying on others. Moving forward without waiting for permission. You have stepped away from the noise. You have started to see clearly. Now it is time to become strong enough to stand on your own. Chapter 3: The Strength of Self-Reliance. Strength is proven when nothing is there to hold you up. Clarity has been built. The noise has been reduced. Identity has started to take shape in silence. But a new pressure begins to rise. Knowing who you are is not enough. Standing on that identity without support is the real test. When pressure increases, the instinct is to look outward, to seek reassurance, to wait for someone to confirm the next step. The truth is, self-reliance begins where support ends. It is the ability to stand without emotional backing. No validation. No reassurance. No one is telling you that you are on the right path. Just decision and action. Just movement without approval. Most people react. You choose. Dependence weakens decision-making. It slows it down. It clouds it. Every choice becomes a negotiation with external voices. Every step requires confirmation. That hesitation builds doubt. That doubt builds inconsistency. This is where most people stop. They refuse to move until they feel supported. They wait for the right words, the right timing, the right encouragement. But it never comes the way they expect. The truth is, strength grows when you rely on yourself. Not because it is easier, but because it forces clarity. It forces commitment. When there is no one else to lean on, the mind sharpens. Decisions become direct. Action becomes immediate. There is no space for overthinking when you are the only one responsible. Most people react. You choose. Choosing self-reliance means accepting full responsibility. No excuses. No shifting blame. No waiting for external conditions to align. Everything starts and ends with you. That level of ownership creates power. Now look deeper. Relying on others does more than weaken decisions. It delays action. Waiting for support feels productive. It feels like preparation. It feels like patience. But it is not. The truth is, waiting for support is a form of hidden procrastination. It disguises itself as a strategy. It pretends to be cautious. But in reality, it is avoidance. It is the fear of moving without certainty. This is where most people stop. They stay stuck in preparation. They gather opinions. They seek advice. They wait for agreement. And while they wait, nothing moves. Action must come from within. No external voice can replace an internal decision. No amount of advice can replace execution. Movement only begins when you decide to move without permission. Most people react. You choose. They wait for signals. You create them. They wait for support. You move without it. They wait for confidence. You build it through action. The truth is, action creates clarity, not the other way around. Every step taken without support strengthens independence. Every decision made without reassurance builds confidence. Every moment of movement without approval breaks dependence. This is not reckless. This is disciplined self-direction. Because the longer you wait, the weaker the instinct becomes. The more you rely on others, the less you trust yourself. And without self-trust, nothing holds. The truth is, self-trust is built through isolation. Not by thinking, not by planning, but by doing. By making decisions alone and living with the outcome. By taking responsibility for both success and failure. This is where most people stop. They avoid responsibility. They avoid risk. They avoid making decisions alone. But that avoidance keeps them weak. Every decision made alone strengthens your core. It builds a record, a history of action, a pattern of self-direction. Over time, that pattern becomes identity. And that identity becomes unshakable. Most people react. You choose. Choosing to act alone means choosing growth over comfort. It means stepping into uncertainty without support. It means trusting your ability to adapt, adjust, and continue. Because trust is not given. It is built. And it is built in moments where there is no one else to rely on. The truth is, you become your own foundation. Not dependent on others. Not controlled by external approval. Not shaken by lack of support. Solid. Stable. Self-directed. That foundation changes everything. Decisions become faster. Actions become cleaner. Focus becomes stronger. There is no hesitation because there is no dependency. This is what real strength looks like. Not loud. Not visible. But undeniable. Most people react. You choose. They collapse without support. You stand regardless. They hesitate without guidance. You move with clarity. They doubt without validation. You trust your process. That difference separates the average from the unshakable. The truth is, self-reliance is not about isolation for its own sake. It is about developing the ability to operate without external support. It is about becoming complete within yourself. Because once that is achieved, nothing can control your direction. No absence of support can stop you. No lack of validation can slow you down. No external condition can dictate your movement. This is where real power begins. You have built an identity in silence. Now you have learned to stand on it alone. The next step is deeper. Moving beyond independence into complete separation from the herd. Because standing alone is one thing. Thinking differently from everyone else is another. Chapter 4. Escape the herd mind. Average is the reward for those who follow. Self-reliance has been built. Decisions are now made without waiting. Action no longer depends on support. But a deeper force still tries to pull you back. Not noise, not distraction, something more subtle. The pressure to fit in. The silent agreement to think like everyone else. To move with the crowd even when you know it leads nowhere. The truth is, the herd mindset keeps people average. It feels safe. It feels accepted. It feels correct. When everyone is moving in the same direction, it creates the illusion that the direction must be right. But the outcome is always the same. Following the crowd leads to predictable outcomes. Predictable outcomes create mediocrity. This is where most people stop. They see what everyone else is doing and assume that is the path. Same habits, same goals, same thinking. Different faces, same results. Most people react. You choose. The herd does not question. It copies. It repeats. It stays within the boundaries of what is already accepted. That limitation becomes a cage, invisible, comfortable, permanent. The truth is, anything built by imitation cannot exceed the source. When you follow the same path, you arrive at the same place. There is no growth in repetition without awareness. Average is not an accident. It is the result of alignment with the crowd. Now look deeper. The herd mindset does more than limit outcomes. It suppresses thinking. Original thought becomes rare in a group that rewards agreement. Speaking differently feels risky. Acting differently feels dangerous. Standing out invites attention. and attention invites judgment. So most people adjust. They soften their ideas. They hide their instincts. They trade truth for acceptance. The truth is, the crowd fears difference. Not because difference is wrong, but because difference disrupts comfort. It challenges norms. It forces reflection, and most people avoid anything that requires them to think more deeply. This is where most people stop. They choose comfort over clarity. They choose agreement over truth. They choose to blend in rather than stand firm. Most people react. You choose. Choosing differently means accepting separation. It means understanding that strength requires distance from the group, not out of arrogance, not out of rebellion, but out of necessity. Because original thinking cannot survive constant conformity. The truth is, strength requires separation. Not permanent isolation, but intentional distance. Enough space to think clearly. Enough silence to hear your own direction. Enough independence to act without needing approval. Without that separation, the mind slowly conforms. It adjusts to the group. It loses its edge. It loses its clarity. And once that happens, the herd decides your limits. Now consider this. Most people do not even realize they are part of the herd. They believe they are thinking independently, but their actions reveal the truth. The same routines, the same fears, the same excuses. This is where most people stop. They never question the environment shaping them. They never step back far enough to see the pattern. But distance changes everything. The truth is, distance reveals truth. Stepping away removes distortion. It breaks the influence of constant agreement. It allows the mind to observe instead of participate. From a distance, patterns become obvious. Behaviors become predictable. Weakness becomes visible. Most people react. You choose. Choosing distance means choosing awareness. It means refusing to be absorbed by the group. It means watching without being controlled, thinking without being influenced. And in that space, clarity sharpens. The moment you leave the herd, you begin to see clearly. You see how decisions are driven by fear of judgment. You see how actions are shaped by the need for approval. You see how limitations are accepted without question. The truth is, most people are not trapped by reality. They are trapped by the group's expectations. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. This is where most people stop, because seeing the truth creates a choice. Stay comfortable within the herd, or step away and face uncertainty alone. Most choose comfort. Most people react. You choose. Choosing to step away means accepting that your path will look different. Your decisions will not always be understood. Your direction will not always be supported. But that is the price of clarity. Because outside the herd, there is space. Space to think, space to build, space to become something that cannot be shaped by external pressure. The truth is, freedom begins where conformity ends. And freedom is not easy. It requires discipline. It requires confidence. It requires the ability to stand alone without being pulled back by the need to belong. But once that freedom is gained, everything changes. Decisions become sharper. Focus becomes stronger. Direction becomes clearer. There is no confusion, because there is no noise from the crowd. Only truth remains. Most people react. You choose. They follow patterns. You create your own. They seek acceptance. You seek clarity. They stay within limits. You move beyond them. That difference defines everything. You have built an identity. You have developed self-reliance. Now you have separated from the herd. The next step is deeper, refining the mind itself, strengthening awareness to a level most never reach. Because once you are no longer influenced by the crowd, the only thing left to master is your own perception. Chapter 5. Silence sharpens awareness. Perception expands when everything goes quiet. The herd has been left behind. The noise has been reduced. Identity has been formed. Self-reliance has been built. But something deeper begins to change now. The way you see, the way you notice, the way you interpret reality itself. Because without constant input, the mind is no longer flooded. It starts to observe. The truth is, silence enhances perception. Noise numbs awareness. Silence sharpens it. When the environment is loud, attention is scattered. It jumps from one thing to another. It reacts instead of observing. It consumes instead of understanding. But when the noise disappears, attention stabilizes. It holds. It studies. It sees what was always there, but never noticed. This is where most people stop. They never remain silent long enough to experience this shift. They return to noise before awareness can develop. They never realize how much they are missing. Most people react. You choose. Choosing silence means choosing to see more, not just externally, but internally. Thoughts become clearer. Patterns become visible. Reactions slow down. Instead of being controlled by impulse, you begin to witness it. The truth is, awareness is the foundation of control. Without awareness, there is no direction, only reaction, only habit, only automatic behavior shaped by external forces. But silence interrupts that pattern. It creates a gap between stimulus and response. And in that gap, power exists. Noise numbs awareness. Silence sharpens it. Now look deeper. Constant stimulation destroys clarity. Every moment filled with input leaves no room for processing. Information enters, but it is never examined, never challenged, never understood. The mind becomes full, but not deep. The truth is, a distracted mind cannot think deeply. Depth requires stillness. This is where most people stop. They prefer constant stimulation because it feels productive. It feels engaging. It feels like they are learning, growing, and moving forward. But in reality, they are just consuming without integration. There is no depth in endless input. Depth comes from reflection, from sitting with a thought, exploring it fully, questioning it, breaking it down, and rebuilding it stronger. Most people react. You choose. Choosing depth means rejecting constant stimulation. It means allowing the mind to slow down, to focus on one idea at a time, to go further instead of wider. Because wide thinking creates surface-level understanding. Deep thinking creates mastery. The truth is, clarity is not built through more information. It is built through better processing. And processing requires silence. Without silence, thoughts overlap. They compete. They interfere with each other. Nothing settles. Nothing becomes clear. But in silence, everything organizes. The mind aligns. Ideas connect. Understanding deepens. Noise numbs awareness. Silence sharpens it. Now understand this. Silence does not just sharpen awareness. It trains focus. Attention is power. Where attention goes, energy follows. Where energy flows, results are created. But attention is weak when it is constantly divided. It loses strength. It loses intensity. It loses direction. The truth is, the quieter your environment, the stronger your mind. Because focus thrives in stillness. This is where most people stop. They never train their attention. They let it be controlled by external triggers, notifications, conversations, entertainment, endless distractions pulling it in different directions. As a result, their focus weakens. Their thinking becomes shallow. Their actions become inconsistent. Most people react. You choose. Choosing silence means taking control of attention, directing it intentionally, holding it steadily, strengthening it over time. Because focus is not natural in a distracted world. It must be built. And it is built in silence. Every moment spent in quiet strengthens concentration. Every moment without distraction increases mental endurance. Every moment of stillness sharpens the ability to stay locked in. The truth is, a focused mind is a powerful mind. It sees what others miss. It understands what others overlook. It acts with precision instead of hesitation. And that level of focus creates an advantage that cannot be ignored. Noise numbs awareness. Silence sharpens it. When awareness is sharp, decisions improve. When focus is strong, execution improves. When clarity is deep, direction becomes undeniable. Everything begins to align. Most people react. You choose. They stay distracted. You become aware. They skim the surface. You go deep. They divide their attention. You concentrate it. That difference separates confusion from clarity, weakness from control, and the average from the exceptional. The truth is, silence is not empty. It is active. It is working. It is refining the mind in ways noise never can. It is training perception, strengthening focus, and building clarity. And once that level of awareness is reached, the next step becomes unavoidable. Because seeing clearly is one thing. Acting consistently on what you see is another. You have sharpened your awareness. Now it is time to test your discipline when no one is watching. Chapter 6: Discipline Without Witness. Real strength is built where no eyes can see it. Awareness has sharpened. The mind now sees clearly. Distraction no longer controls attention. But clarity alone does not create results. Seeing the path means nothing without walking it. And walking it alone, without recognition, without reward, without anyone watching, that is where the real test begins. The truth is, real discipline happens when no one is watching. Public effort is easy. Private effort builds strength. In public, energy rises. Motivation appears. Performance increases, not because of internal drive, but because of external presence. Being seen creates pressure. Pressure creates action. But remove the audience, and everything changes. This is where most people stop. Without eyes on them, effort disappears. Without recognition, consistency fades. Without validation, discipline collapses. Most people react. You choose. Choosing discipline means acting the same way in private as in public, with no drop in effort, no change in standard, and no dependency on attention. Because discipline that depends on being seen is not discipline. It is performance. The truth is, what you do when no one is watching reveals everything. It reveals your standards, your mindset, and your level of control. Anyone can act strong when observed. Few remain consistent when alone. Public effort is easy. Private effort builds strength. Now look deeper. External accountability creates a dangerous illusion. It creates structure, pressure, and short-term consistency, but it does not build internal discipline. It replaces it. When someone else is watching, the responsibility shifts. The pressure becomes external. The motivation is borrowed. The truth is, true discipline needs no audience. It is internal. This is where most people stop. They rely on systems, partners, deadlines, and expectations to stay consistent. And when those external forces disappear, so does their discipline, because it was never theirs to begin with. Most people react. You choose. Choosing internal discipline means removing the need for external pressure. It means holding yourself accountable without anyone reminding you. It means executing without needing recognition. Because reliance on external accountability creates weakness. It builds a habit of waiting for instruction, waiting for pressure, waiting for consequences. But discipline does not wait. The truth is, discipline acts without being told. It moves without being pushed. It continues without being rewarded. That is the difference. Public effort is easy. Private effort builds strength. Now understand this. Unseen effort is the foundation of unstoppable individuals. What you do alone defines you, not what others see. This is where most people stop. They focus on visible results, on public achievements, on moments that can be recognized. They ignore the process that creates those results. But the process is everything. Every repetition done in silence, every decision made without recognition, every action taken without reward, that is where strength is built. Most people react. You choose. Choosing unseen effort means committing to the process without needing proof, without needing to show progress, without needing to announce growth. Because real growth does not need to be displayed. It needs to be done. The truth is, the strongest individuals are built in private. Their habits are formed in silence. Their discipline is tested without witnesses. Their consistency is maintained without pressure. And when they step into the public, the results appear effortless. But nothing about it was easy. Public effort is easy. Private effort builds strength. The difference is time. Those who rely on visibility build slowly, inconsistently, and often collapse. Those who commit in silence build steadily, powerfully, and without interruption. Because there is no dependency, no need for approval, no need for recognition, no need for external motivation, only action. Most people react. You choose. They perform when watched. You execute regardless. They seek validation. You build quietly. They wait for pressure. You apply it internally. That difference creates separation. The truth is, discipline without witness creates certainty. It removes doubt, hesitation, and inconsistency. It establishes a standard that does not change with circumstances. Because once discipline becomes internal, it becomes automatic. It no longer requires effort to maintain. It becomes the default. This is where real power begins. Not in moments of visibility, but in moments of isolation. Not in recognition, but in repetition. Not in applause, but in silence. What you do alone defines you, not what others see. And once the truth is fully understood, everything changes. The need to prove disappears. The need to show fades. The focus shifts entirely to building. Quietly. Consistently. Relentlessly. Public effort is easy. Private effort builds strength. You have learned to see clearly. You have built discipline in silence. Now the next challenge is deeper, controlling what happens internally when there is no distraction left. Because once actions are disciplined, emotions must follow. Chapter 7. Emotional Control in Isolation. Discipline controls action. Now control must go deeper. Because when action becomes consistent, distraction fades. And when distraction fades, something else rises, emotion. Solitude forces confrontation. Without distraction, emotions surface. This is necessary. Most people never reach this point. They fill every moment with noise, screens, conversations, stimulation, not for entertainment, but for escape. Because silence reveals what has been avoided: uncertainty, doubt, fear, regret, tension. When there is nothing left to distract the mind, it turns inward. And what has been suppressed begins to rise. This is where most people stop. They mistake discomfort for danger. They rush to escape it. They reach for noise, for stimulation, for anything that pulls them away from what they feel. Most people react. You choose. Choosing solitude means choosing to face what surfaces, not to fix it immediately, not to suppress it, but to see it clearly. Because without distraction, emotions surface. This is necessary. It is not a flaw in the process. It is the process. What rises in silence is what has been controlling you in noise. And until it is faced, it remains in control. Now, understand the next level. Emotional strength is not built by avoiding discomfort. It is built by sitting in it. Avoidance creates weakness. Endurance creates control. Discomfort is not the problem. The reaction to discomfort is. Most people train themselves to escape the moment something feels wrong. The moment tension appears, they move away. The moment pressure builds, they distract themselves. Over time, this creates fragility. Because anything that cannot be faced becomes something that controls behavior. Most people react. You choose. Choosing endurance means staying present when discomfort appears, not acting on impulse, not escaping immediately, not needing relief. Just sitting with it. Observing it. Letting it exist without reacting. This is where strength is built, not in removing discomfort, but in proving that it does not control you. Avoidance creates weakness. Endurance creates control. The longer you can remain still in the presence of discomfort, the less power it has. And the less power it has, the more control you gain. This is the shift. Emotions stop being commands. They become signals. Signals can be observed. They can be understood. But they do not need to be obeyed. This is emotional control. Now go deeper. Silence is not empty. It is stabilizing. Silence fosters emotional stability. When there is no constant input, no constant reaction, the mind begins to settle. The intensity of emotions decreases. The fluctuations become smaller. The reactions become slower. Clarity increases. Most people never experience this because they never allow silence to last long enough. They interrupt the process before stability forms. Most people react. You choose. Choosing silence means allowing the mind to regulate itself, not forcing calm, but allowing it to emerge. Because calm is not created through effort. It is revealed when interference is removed. And once it appears, it changes everything. Calm is power. The one who controls emotions controls outcomes. A calm mind does not rush decisions. It does not react impulsively. It does not get pulled by temporary feelings. It observes. It evaluates. It chooses. That is power. Because outcomes are not determined by what happens externally, but by how you respond internally. If emotions control reactions, outcomes become unpredictable. If control is internal, outcomes become intentional. Calm is power. The one who controls emotions controls outcomes. This is the advantage. In pressure, others panic. You remain steady. In uncertainty, others react. You observe. In discomfort, others escape. You endure. That difference compounds. Over time, it creates separation that cannot be matched by effort alone. Because effort without control leads to inconsistency. Control without effort still maintains direction. But combined, they create precision. Most people react. You choose. They avoid discomfort. You sit with it. They fear silence. You use it. They are controlled by emotion. You understand it. And that understanding removes its power. Without distraction, emotions surface. This is necessary. Avoidance creates weakness. Endurance creates control. Calm is power. The one who controls emotions controls outcomes. Once this is internalized, nothing external feels overwhelming. Because nothing internal is out of control. And when both action and emotion are disciplined, the foundation is complete. Now the next level begins. Because once you control what you do and how you feel, the final step is controlling what you believe. Chapter 8. Building without validation. Discipline is internal. Emotion is controlled. Now the final barrier appears, validation. Not the obvious kind, not praise or recognition alone, but the deeper need to be seen, to be approved, to be confirmed. This is where growth quietly stops for most people. Because validation feels like progress, but it is not. It is a trap. The addiction to validation is subtle. It disguises itself as motivation. It tells you that feedback is necessary, that recognition is proof, that approval means you are on the right path. But over time, it creates dependence. Needing approval limits growth. Approval is a trap. When approval becomes necessary, action becomes conditional. You begin to measure progress based on response, not reality. You adjust behavior to be accepted, not to improve. This is where most people stop. They build for reaction. They speak for agreement. They act for recognition. And without it, they hesitate. Most people react. You choose. Choosing independence means removing the need to be validated. It means acting without waiting for confirmation. It means continuing without reassurance. Because once approval is required, control is lost. Your direction is no longer yours. It belongs to whoever is watching. Needing approval limits growth. Approval is a trap. Now understand the shift. When you build alone, something changes. The pressure to perform disappears. There is no audience to impress, no expectation to meet, no image to maintain. Only the work remains. Freedom comes when no one is watching. Progress becomes real. This is where authenticity is forced. Without external judgment, there is nothing to perform, nothing to exaggerate, nothing to hide behind. Only truth. This is where most people stop. They avoid this level because it removes illusion. It removes the ability to appear better than they are. But that illusion is the problem. Most people react. You choose. Choosing to build alone means accepting reality without distortion. It means facing the gap between where you are and where you need to be, and working on it, quietly, consistently, without needing to show it. Because progress that depends on visibility is fragile. Progress built in silence is stable. Freedom comes when no one is watching. Progress becomes real. Now go deeper. Without validation, standards must come from within. This is where real builders are separated from performers. Because when there is no applause, no feedback, no recognition, only one thing remains to guide action: your own standard. Your approval must be enough. The strongest builders work without applause. This is the highest level of control. Not doing more when watched and less when alone, not rising with praise and falling with criticism, but remaining constant, self-directed, self-correcting, and self-driven. Most people react. You choose. They need feedback to continue. You continue regardless. They seek approval to feel certain. You create certainty through action. That difference creates independence. And independence creates power. Your approval must be enough. The strongest builders work without applause. Because once your standard is internal, it cannot be influenced, reduced, or negotiated. It becomes fixed. And that fixed standard creates consistency. Consistency creates progress. Progress creates results. Without noise, without distraction, without validation, just execution. This is where real building begins. Not when others recognize it, but when you no longer need them to. Needing approval limits growth. Approval is a trap. Freedom comes when no one is watching. Progress becomes real. Your approval must be enough. The strongest builders work without applause. Once this is understood, the need to be seen disappears. And what replaces it is something far more powerful: focus. Pure, uninterrupted, internal focus. Now the process is complete. You see clearly. You act consistently. You control emotion. You build without validation. Nothing external is required. And nothing external can stop you. Chapter 9. The Power of Being Unseen. At this stage, everything external has been removed. No dependence on attention, no need for validation, no emotional instability, no inconsistency in action. Now a new advantage appears: invisibility. Not absence, not hiding out of fear, but choosing not to be seen while you build. Because when no one expects you, everything changes. When no one expects you, you move freely. Freedom creates leverage. Expectation creates pressure. Pressure creates constraint. When people are watching, they form opinions, create timelines, and attach identity to your progress. And without realizing it, you begin to carry that weight. You start adjusting, explaining, proving. That is friction. This is where most people stop. They chase visibility too early. They want to be seen before they are ready. They want recognition before results exist. And in doing so, they trade freedom for attention. Most people react. You choose. Choosing invisibility means removing expectation. No one is watching. No one is waiting. No one is judging. So nothing controls your movement. You can experiment. You can fail quietly. You can improve without pressure. That is leverage. Because while others are performing, you are building. When no one expects you, you move freely. Freedom creates leverage. Now, understand the next level. Visibility does not just create pressure. It drains energy. Every time you expose your progress, you invite response, opinions, feedback, comparison, noise. And noise divides focus. Exposure invites distraction. Protection builds momentum. Most people underestimate this. They think sharing creates accountability. They think attention creates opportunity. But more often, it creates an interruption. You start thinking about how things are perceived instead of how they are built. You split energy between execution and explanation. And progress slows. This is where most people stop. They become managers of perception instead of creators of results. Most people react. You choose. Choosing to stay unseen means protecting your energy. It means keeping your focus undivided. It means allowing momentum to build without interference. Because momentum requires consistency, and consistency requires uninterrupted effort. Exposure invites distraction. Protection builds momentum. The less you explain, the more you execute. The less you share, the more you build. The less you respond, the more you progress. This is efficiency. Now go deeper. Quiet progress does not look impressive in the moment. There are no updates, no announcements, no visible proof. But underneath, something is building. And when it reaches a certain point, it does not appear gradually. It appears all at once. Silence is preparation. When you emerge, you dominate. This is the part most people misunderstand. They see sudden success and assume sudden effort. They see results and assume visibility created them. But they are only seeing the surface. They did not see the isolation, the repetition, the discipline, the emotional control, the building without validation. All of it happened unseen. This is where most people stop. They want visible progress to validate effort. They do not trust the process without proof. Most people react. You choose. Choosing quiet progress means trusting what is being built even when it cannot be seen. It means continuing without evidence. It means committing to long periods of silence. Because silence is not empty. It is preparation. Every unseen hour compounds. Every unnoticed improvement stacks. Every silent repetition strengthens the foundation. Until eventually, the result becomes too large to ignore. And when it appears, it looks sudden. But it was not. Silence is preparation. When you emerge, you dominate. That is the advantage of being unseen. No pressure, no distraction, no interference, only focused, uninterrupted growth. While others are visible and stagnant, you are invisible and progressing. And when the time comes to step forward, there is no need to announce it. The results speak. When no one expects you, you move freely. Freedom creates leverage. Exposure invites distraction. Protection builds momentum. Silence is preparation. When you emerge, you dominate. This is the final shift. From being seen to becoming undeniable. And once you reach that point, visibility is no longer something you chase. It is something that follows. Chapter 10. Becoming Unshakable Alone. Everything now comes together. Awareness sharpened your mind. Discipline stabilized your actions. Emotional control grounded your reactions. Independence removed your need for validation. Invisibility gave you leverage. Now all of it forms one identity. Not something you switch on and off. Not something dependent on environment. But something constant. Because strength is not built in moments of intensity. It is built in solitude. Strength is built in solitude. Always return to this truth. Solitude removed distraction. It exposed weakness. It forced discipline. It revealed emotion. It eliminated dependence. Everything that could be hidden was brought forward. And everything that was built without support. This is where most people stop. They seek environments that make them feel strong. They rely on structure, people, and conditions to maintain their identity. But remove those, and they collapse. Most people react. You choose. Choosing solitude as a foundation means your strength does not depend on anything external. Not environment. Not people. Not circumstances. Because it was built without them. Strength is built in solitude. Always return to this truth. Now define what that creates. An unshakable individual is not loud. Not visible by default. Not constantly proving anything. They are stable. Unaffected by pressure. Unmoved by opinion. Unchanged by circumstance. Because nothing external determines their state. They do not need approval, support, or recognition. They stand regardless. This is the difference. Most people require alignment. They need things to go right. They need support to stay consistent. They need encouragement to keep moving. Without it, they hesitate. This is where most people stop. Because needing support feels normal. But it creates dependency. Most people react. You choose. Choosing independence at this level means removing the need entirely. Not rejecting support, but not requiring it. Not depending on it to function. Because once something is required, it becomes a point of weakness. They do not need approval, support, or recognition. They stand regardless. That is stability. No matter the environment, they execute. No matter the pressure, they remain controlled. No matter the situation, they continue forward. Not because it is easy, but because it is who they are. Now, understand the final transformation. Once you can operate on your own, everything changes. Because control shifts completely inward. No external force can dictate your behavior. No opinion can alter your direction. No absence of support can stop your progress. Because nothing is required. Once you master being alone, nothing can control you. You become self-contained power. This is the highest level. Not needing motivation, because action is automatic. Not needing discipline, because it is embedded. Not needing validation, because standards are internal. Not needing stability, because you are stable. Everything exists within. This is where most people stop. They build pieces, but never integrate them. They improve in one area, but remain dependent in another. And that dependency creates vulnerability. Most people react. You choose. Choosing full integration means every part aligns. Thought, action, emotion, and identity all operate under the same standard. No contradiction. No hesitation. No reliance. Only execution. Once you master being alone, nothing can control you. You become self-contained power. That is the end of dependence, and the beginning of complete control. Because control is not about dominating others. It is about not being dominated by anything. Not a distraction. Not emotion. Not validation. Not pressure. Not expectation. Nothing. Strength is built in solitude. Always return to this truth. They do not need approval, support, or recognition. They stand regardless. Once you master being alone, nothing can control you. You become self-contained power. This is the final state. Unshakable. Because nothing happens. But because nothing moves you unless you choose it. And from that position, every action becomes intentional. Every step becomes precise. Every result becomes inevitable. You are no longer reacting to the world. You are operating within it, on your own terms. Alone. And completely in control. You were taught to fear being alone. You were told that isolation means failure, that silence means weakness, that without people you are nothing. That belief ends now. Because everything you have heard in this journey points to one truth. Strength is not built in crowds. It is built in silence. It is built in the moments where no one sees you, no one supports you, and no one validates you. That is where discipline is forged. That is where identity becomes clear. That is where emotional control takes shape. You do not need more noise. You need more space. You do not need more approval. You need more self-trust. You do not need the herd. You need distance from it. So here is your challenge. Step back. Turn down the noise. Walk alone for a while. Build without telling anyone. Improve without showing anyone. Become stronger without anyone noticing. And when the time comes, you will not need to prove anything. Your presence will speak for itself.